Most people believe strength comes from holding on to comfort, holding on to identity, holding on to what makes them feel safe. Miyamoto Musashi believed the opposite. He believed that whatever you cling to will eventually control you, and whatever controls you will weaken you at the moment you need clarity the most. Musashi was not a philosopher who lived in comfort and wrote about discipline from a distance. He lived as a wandering swordsman, often without a home, without status, without attachment to place or praise. Before his death, he wrote a short set of rules known as the Dakoto. They were not meant to inspire. They were meant to strip a person down to what cannot be taken away. This is a story about one of those rules, the rule of no attachment. Musashi did not build strength by adding more. He removed what weakened him: excess possessions, excess desire, excess explanation. Each removal sharpened his presence. Each act of restraint trained his mind to remain steady without reassurance. Kenji tried something small. He stopped explaining himself when not necessary. He allowed silence to remain unanswered. He delayed comfort instead of reaching for it immediately. These were not dramatic acts, but they revealed how deeply he had relied. Modern life encourages constant dependence on stimulation, validation, and certainty. Musashi's rule of no attachment does not require rejection of modern life, but mastery within it. Use what is useful, enjoy what is present, and release what demands ownership of your peace. Non-attachment begins internally. You do not need to abandon responsibilities or relationships. You need to abandon the belief that they define your worth. When worth is internal, circumstances lose their power. As Kenji practiced restraint, something changed. Not his external life, but his inner posture. Pressure no longer felt like an enemy. Silence no longer felt empty. Decisions became simpler because fewer things were being defended. Musashi's calm was not passive. It was readiness without tension. A mind unentangled by fear sees openings others miss. This is why non-attachment is not withdrawal. It is strategic presence. To live without needing is not to live without meaning. It is to choose meaning deliberately rather than inherit it unconsciously. Musashi's final teachings were not about winning. They were about not being controlled. Kenji realized that strength was not the absence of difficulty, but the absence of inner bargaining. When the mind stops negotiating for comfort, action becomes clean. When nothing must be preserved, everything can be faced. Conclusion: the unburdened mind. Miyamoto Musashi left behind no empire and no comfort. He left behind a way of standing in the world without being owned by it. No attachment is not denial of life. It is refusal to be dominated by it. Whatever you cling to will ask for your attention when you least can spare it. Whatever you can release will return as calm. Walk lightly. Hold nothing too tightly. Let discipline begin where dependence ends. Kenji was not weak, but he was heavy. Heavy with expectations, routines, and silent fear of losing what he had built. His days were orderly, productive, and respectable. Yet beneath that order was tension. Every decision passed through an invisible filter. What would this cost me? And what might I lose if it goes wrong? He did not notice the weight at first. It showed itself in hesitation, in avoidance of discomfort, in the quiet anger that surfaced when plans changed. Miyamoto Musashi lived without anchors by choice. He owned little, avoided luxury, and refused long-term dependence on patrons or institutions. This was not poverty as punishment. It was freedom as strategy. Musashi understood that attachment dulls perception, and a dull mind dies quickly. In his duels, Musashi often appeared indifferent to outcome. That indifference was not carelessness. It was clarity. When nothing is needed, attention sharpens. When nothing is protected, fear dissolves. No attachment does not mean emotional emptiness. It does not mean isolation, coldness, or rejection of life. It means refusing to let your sense of self depend on outcomes, possessions, or approval. It is the discipline of not being owned by what you enjoy. Musashi warned against seeking pleasure for its own sake because pleasure, once expected, becomes a leash. The same is true of comfort, recognition, and certainty. When the mind demands them, it loses its ability to endure silence. Kenji began to notice how often his reactions were shaped by fear of loss. Criticism felt personal because his identity depended on competence. Restlessness crept in because silence threatened his sense of control. Even success felt fragile because it could always be taken away. This is the unseen cost of attachment. It fractures attention and drains strength. Energy is spent defending rather than acting. Life becomes maintenance rather than movement. Musashi saw this clearly and chose a harder,